start with those. Now when I started fishing in the late 60s, but most of the early 70s, we had all sorts of leads. We had a lead called an Ardsley bomb, which would have been like that, but it would have a swivel here. And they would roll around, because these days you've got swivels built into your lead links, so you don't need a swivel. But in those days you had to have a swivel. Well, you didn't have to have a swivel on the lead, but it would twist your line. So you had a swivel on the lead so it could roll around and the swivel would move in it. All of these leads are just loop leads. They've all just got small loops. But in those days you could buy, oh there's one. There's one, a genuine Ardsley bomb. Swivel built into the lead. So there you have it, the Ardsley bomb. Good lead. That's a 2 ounce. But much on the beach because it rolled around too much. Okay, if you had a very light current, but if you had any sort of a current, you needed something which holds slightly better. So we've moved up to these then. These are pyramid leads. These are all a bit rounded off now. The pyramid bit is slightly rounded off. These are actually square originally on the edges. This hold quite well actually. You cast those out, that would pull against the sand and it would hold quite well. It wouldn't roll too much because it was square, although these obviously aren't, but they were once. And that would hold quite well against the current. And in those days I was only using like a 25-pound line and a fixed spool reel I think. It would hold fairly well for the running ledges and paternosters we used to use. And they were quite good. And they would roll a little bit, but they would certainly hold a lot better than the old Ardsley bomb, which would just roll around like anything. These don't roll very much, but so they're quite good. Without gripping the sand too much, so you can strike. Right, the third lead we'll use will be one of these, which is a straightforward a long lead, square. This is a boat lead, but the one I would use would be much smaller than half that size. This is for 8 ounces. It would have been 3 or 4 ounce maximum, and that's the standard lead in those days. We didn't have much choice. You could also get a watch lead, which was a round shape. I haven't got one of those. I haven't seen one for donkey's years now, but you can probably look it up online, watch lead. Now then, the variation on this, which we gradually got into, was the first type of grip lead, which is one of these with the grips. I have one here. This was one of the early ones, long before we had breakaways. And these are the leads we use now. This, as you can see, is pretty knackered. It's pretty knackered. The wires, work loose in the lead. Lead's very soft, so anything goes through lead, it's going to work loose eventually. And these two too, and you can virtually pull these through now. But when they're made, they're not quite like this. And I have to happen a brand new one, never been used. When you get them like that, that is a brand new one, 3 ounce, 3 dots on the side, never been used. And it's never likely to be used either, because I'm not going to be using it. But these are made of brass or copper. Usually copper, but they could be brass as well. And you folded them out, that's how you bought them. You folded them out like that, and then they would grip pretty well. A lot better than that obviously because they move, but they're still going to grip pretty well. The little spike's going to dig into the sand and grip the bottom. And they would eventually, they didn't usually get that stage. What happened normally was they bent in and bent out, and the wires would come off. They would just break off. Metal fatigue. So the wires being bent in and out. I'm not going to bend these out because that's a virgin lead. Could even be worth some money, couldn't it? Yep, that's a virgin lead, 3 ounces. That's what we used to use. We started using grapples on high current sandy beaches. And that was in the 60s and 70s. Now in the 70s I think the very first grapple, the first breakaway leads came along. And I think they were this design here, which is original bead breakaway with beads, little notches in the sides for the beads to go into. That's got a bit of paint on it. I think it got painted. Yep, beads on the side, and they will work perfectly well. And they were the first breakaways. Now then, by this time I'd already started making my own leads. So they were the very first breakaways. But before breakaways, I used to make my own leads. Now this is my first homemade lead. That is a surf bomb. And you can buy the lead moulds, and you had to buy them in certain sizes. This is a 5 ounce, and this is the mould. Fits in there like that. You put your little loop, comes right down to here. The little loop comes right down here and it's hooked on the end so it can't come flying out. If you didn't put hooks on the end, it certainly would come flying out. But you put a hook on the end of the loop, in the middle of the mould, and the 2 moulds will be like that. So your 2 moulds, I'll take that out. There's your 2 moulds. You'll clamp them together. Make sure they're hot. You wouldn't do it with your fingers. You have gloves. But you use your mould and you clamp it together. The little loop will go in the top there. I don't know if you can see that. Some little tiny holes there. Little tiny holes in the top. That's where your loop will go. And it will go into there. Then you clamp the mould, and there in the top is the hole. And you would pour your lead in there. Heat up the mould. Heat up the lead to melting point. Pour your lead in there, and it will come up. If you've got the lead mould too hot, the lead will go straight through it and out the other side. So the trick was to get your mould hot enough to take the lead, but not so hot that it will throw straight through. And I had that a few times. And also these dowels are screwed on here with some screws, because you certainly couldn't touch that mould when it was hot. So you had gloves as well, obviously. And you put your mould like that, clamped it together, poured in your lead, and left it for a few minutes, cool down. Then you could pull it apart and the lead would drop into a cold water bucket. So that was the first one. And these also had holes in the side, but you can't really see actually. Holes in the side for taking side leads. And here is a grapple with the wires in the side. And it was the first mould I ever bought, and it's very good. And as you can see, these are still usable. They're a bit wobbly, but nothing like the old one. But I haven't used one of these for years now. Let's face it, everybody uses breakaways these days, and who can blame them? You don't really want to be dragging that across the sand like that, because these did grip. These did grip. So you got your surf bomb plain, surf bomb wide. I must have made probably 50 or 60 of them in my time. Different length of wires, because if you change the wires you can have as long as you want. And you can also put a long stick on here. I'm not sure I've got one, I'll have a look and see. I might have a long one here. Yeah, there we are. Right, so there's a long one with a longer tail on it. Twist it up and that would grip better. And that will grip a lot better. Like most modern leads, the longer the tail, the better the grip. But then you can vary your grip. That's the whole point of having different types of leads. Before I get onto breakaways, I'm going to show you different types of leads. Now this is a Dungy lead. Very long tail and grip to stick out the bottom. I think I used to buy these. I don't think I made this, I can't remember now. But all the wires you could buy, and that would really grip. And at Dungeness you cast out up currents and you let this sink and you leave a bow in the line. If you don't leave a bow in the line, it will just pull out again. But you leave a bow so the line's like that, comes around in an arch. I'll show you the illustration of that. And that's a Dungy lead. And that's what you see at Dungeness, and also you could buy the shorter tail ones, but I prefer the long tail ones because they just, I mean, you want to fishing at Dungeness, you want a good gripping lead. You want one that's not going to pull out easily. And once they pulled out, they came out quite easily. It was just all around. Got a hell of a current now. But they would work extremely well, and your cod would take the bait and pull the lead out, and you get a slackline bite. And then you know you've got a bite in, because these hold really well. Right, so that's that one, and that's that one. Right, here's a variation. That's one of the old type of square leads, long wires on it, and that would hold better too. You could chuck that out and it would hold pretty well. Certainly better because the wires are farther back, so they hold better. That's the original version. I don't know where that came from, no idea. I never bought it, I never made it either, so picked it up a long way somewhere. Interesting leads. And finally, we come on to the modern plastic roller breakaways, which are probably the best of all. Although I wouldn't say they work any better than the big ones, they're just more neat. There again, you can vary how much power you have on these by bending them out and bending them in. They give a stronger or lesser grip, because some places you need a strong grip and some places you need a lesser grip. If you're fishing for small fish, you would use a lesser grip, simply because you don't want the lead to hold too well. But most fish hook themselves against these, so it's not that important how much grip there is. Important thing is that the lead holds bottom, and these are the original ones, which I don't think are particularly good, but they work. The best holding leads are the long tail ones. They will always, obviously the weight is over the points, and you know the points dig in, whereas these you're pulling across. So now I'm going to show you a variation on the plastic bead breakaway. There it goes. That is a plastic bead breakaway, and it would hook onto there. You've got the lead link there, and you would get double the holding power. You've got a loop there in the plastic, and you would connect your lead link to that, your lead to that, and you had double power. And they work quite well as well, because you could have a 5-ounce lead with a lot of holding power without any extra weight at all. I hate big leads. I prefer to use as small lead as I can get away with. So a big lead is not what I want to use. If I can use a smaller lead with one of these, I don't think you can still get these, but I've got 7 of them. Very good they are, and well worth having if you're in an area where you don't want to have a big lead, but you've got a strong current. But then later on you get into these, which have got their own. That's another variation. That just clips in. Almost quite heavy now. They just clip into there, and that's your retainer, which holds your hook. And then that flips up and knocks the hook off. In theory, not that I use them because most of my hooks are well above the lead, but that's quite a useful little bit of kit. Several of those. I don't think I actually bought one. I think I've probably found all these. I really don't remember buying these because I don't use hooks like that onto the lead. All my hooks are either above the lead or below it, and well above it or below it. But that's another little variation you can get. And finally we come on to the well-known Gemini leads, which are the probably the most adaptable lead of all. You buy the mould, you can make the lead whatever size you want it, 4, 5, 6, 5.5, 6.5. You just smooth the little thing, I'll show you. That's a plain Gemini.